Welcome to Handmade Happenings. I'm Marissa, and do you remember when I said this in a recent video? Have like full princess seam, so no waist seam, and it just goes all the way down in panels. So that wasn't really an option because I absolutely was not going to try and draft one either. Yeah, so guess what I'm doing today? I have come up with an idea for a project that, for whatever reason, a princess seam dress is the style I want to do. And so I will be trying to draft a pattern. I haven't been able to find a tutorial really for drafting one of these dresses, so I am kind of making this up as I go along. So this is more of a vlog style video, though I will try to be very clear on what I'm doing so that, you know, if it turns out it could possibly be replicated, or if nothing else, you'll know what not to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my princess seam bodice pattern. I'm going to take a copy of it, and I'm going to remove all of the seam allowances. And I do mean all of them, like even the neckline, the armhole, the waist, because for my project, I need all of the seam allowances gone. Now, even if that wasn't the case, I would still be removing the seam allowances from the side seam. So like this side seam as well as this side seam, and doing that on all of the pieces. And that's just because the way I want to do this is to use one of my half circle skirt pattern to create the skirt panels that it's hard to explain at this point in the process, but basically I'm using my half circle skirt pattern as a template of sorts to create the skirt for my new pattern. And the half circle skirt does not have enough seam allowance to do that if I don't subtract out the seam allowance on my pattern, on my bodice pattern, if that makes sense. Okay, so I have my skirt piece ready as well as my copy of the bodice. Bodice, like I said, has all of the seam allowances removed. The skirt has the waist seam allowance removed. It does have a little extra room on the side seams because I didn't remove those seam allowances. I'm leaving them partly because I just didn't want to mess with trying to remove them, and partly because I figure that way if I'm off, it gives me a little more wiggle room to fix it. So at this point, I need to attach the top piece to the skirt piece so that, you know, it's all one piece for a dress. So I have a mat down. It's one of my cutting mats. This is mainly so that I can make sure that everything's straight, because what I'm going to do is I'm taking my front bodice piece and I'm lining it up with the skirt piece so that they touch right at the waist. So basically the papers touch. And this line here needs to be completely straight because it will be cut on the fold. And what that does is that makes this piece of the pattern over here kind of overlap with at the waist. And from my understanding, what few semi-tutorials that I found said that is okay. I have them overlapped. I've got that there just to hold it in place because I'm not going to tape it down yet. What I'm going to do is I'm just taking my pencil and marking where the pattern is going to sit. And I'm going to take my pattern piece and flip it around a minute. And what I'm doing here is I want to line the top of the skirt up so that like they're even, like at the waist here. And then right where I marked, where that top of that line is, I want it to kind of turn over under the fold, like that. Then line this up like that, kind of hug here. And press so that it's kind of laying flat and going down into a crease. And once I'm sure it's relatively the way I want it, I'm just pressing that crease really well into my pattern. This to give me the angle that I want. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut this right along that fold as neatly as possible. And for me, that may or may not be all that neat. So it's cut, and I'm just going to come back in with my bodice pattern piece. And once again, line the folded side up so that the pieces meet, like just touch, and are in a straight line. And then I'm just going to tape it all down. And here, theoretically, is my first pattern piece. Now for the next piece, which is the front side piece. And what I'm going to do here is I have my paper facing me, my skirt pattern facing me along that line that I already cut. And this piece, this side here, is the seam that would attach to the center front. And so that's the one that I want to even up the same way that I did on the other. And in theory, what I'm thinking is that by using this side that I already cut on the skirt, I should get the same angle so that the pieces will sew together properly. Another reason that doing this without the seam allowance to me is easier is because then I just have the ability to make sure it's right before adding the seam allowance back in. So I'm gonna pull this one back up. This is my front one. And I'm lining up the seam that got cut so that I can kind of see, I'm trying to see anyway, where exactly, like how far down does it overlap from the other one, which I can't actually see because of how it sits. But anyway, what I'm going to do is just flip this up a bit so that I can see. So this is lined up there. Down here I can see kind of where that pencil mark is, and that's how far I need it to overlap on this edge. And I think, I'm not positive here, but I think what I want is, so if this edge here, which is the edge that connects to the center front, was overlapped, then I want the other edge to not overlap, I think. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what I'm going to do. So this one overlaps, this one down here does not overlap, so I'll just mark it right there. That's where I need the fold to be. So now I'm just going to repeat the same thing I did with the last skirt, folding it right here where I marked, lining up at the waist, and then letting it sort of naturally fall and fold at the angle that it needs. And cut along that line again. Alright, so let's see if I can line this up again. And it's interesting, this one angles a little, so there's actually a bit of a gap between pattern pieces. So I'm just going to have to put something under it later, or at least some tape on the other side so it doesn't stick to everything. And that is the front side piece. I am going to, I think, go ahead and check this to the center front piece just to make sure that I'm hopefully on the right track here. So let's see. And the nice thing is with no seam allowances means that I can pretty much just butt it right up and see, kind of press it together, press it out. And look at that, it lines up on both ends, so hopefully that means it's right. Alright, so now I'm just going to do the same thing with the back pieces, but I'm going to start at the opposite end of my paper. So this end here is the uncut end, just like I started on an uncut edge on the other one. I'm going to start here and work my way towards that edge that was already cut, just because it makes more sense to me, and I figure that really straight edge is always helpful. Alright, the last piece. Okay, so something went wrong with this last one. It's angled all wrong, so, and it doesn't line up with this. I don't have it angled deep enough, I think, actually, because this one overlaps. The center back overlaps more. You probably can't see it, but anyway, it overlaps more on here than it does over on the side back. So I guess I need to figure that out. Oh, I see what the problem is. I forgot to cut the seam allowance off at the waist on the center back. So I have fixed the pieces. They look a lot more even. This is the center back. It really didn't have like a lot to do other than to shorten it at the waist. But the side back piece looks a lot better, I think. It still looks a little funny to me. I think this angle here is a little odd, but it's a lot better than it was, and so I'm going to go with it because everything does line up as far as the skirt hem and the top and everything, so I'm going to call it as good as it's going to get. And since I'm happy with what the side seams seem to look like, I am just going to shorten the skirt probably about 5 inches or so. I haven't fully decided. And I'm going to end this video here. If you want to see how this pattern turned out, I will have a video of me actually making a dress using it, coming out either next week or the week after. I haven't quite decided yet. Either way, once it's out, the link will be in the description and should be also on screen. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will join me again next week for another handmade happening.